The following video contains graphic details and graphic stories from the Vietnam War. These story submissions have remained lost media for the past 7 years, and I have only recently uncovered them while going through old files. So you'll be hearing them for the first time today. Do note that this video and its contents do not represent any of my views. I'm simply narrating these stories for all of you to hear. So, without further ado, let us begin. Dear Creepy Fox, I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and as a first-time listener and a poster to your channel, I appreciate what you're doing, but that's beside the point. I am a 16-year-old male who makes his way through life by boxing at home and at gyms with my personal coach. We'll call him Jake for the sake of the story. Now, Jake is 64 years old. He was a Marine of Native American descent and fought in the Vietnam War. He and I clicked the first day after discussing our dislike for similar things, and me showing him my war memorabilia, and us just having so much in common. He to this day is like my grandfather, and a man who I consider family to the highest extent. Anyway, a few months into my boxing lessons, Jake told me about some of his experiences in Vietnam. He has told me so many, but this one sticks with me to this day. He didn't tell me specifics of location, except that it was by the coast. So Jake and a small unit of 4 men teamed up with a group of Navy SEALs to check out a POW compound that was labeled as abandoned. Once they got within a mile of the compound, they saw enemy guards in the towers, as well as inside the fences. They backed away, and they planned a strategy to take the camp. The SEALs would take the left perimeter, meanwhile the others would focus on the right. Jake would pick the guards off the tower since he had a crossbow. Yeah, a crossbow, you heard me right. But it wouldn't attract any attention, and they had to play it quiet. Jake made his way into the brush and focused his scope on the guard's head. He got him, the other guards none the wiser. He then told me after what he had seen inside the camp, he had felt no remorse for the guards he killed. After the attack, with no casualties on Jake's team, they moved in, and inside were horrors that no one should ever have to live through or ever see. Inside the camp's confinement cells were a total of 5 disheveled, frail, and thoroughly tortured American soldiers. Each man had distinct and horrible things done to them. Prisoner number 1 was confined for so long and beaten so many times by his captors, he was left blind and unable to speak English. Prisoner number 2 had his hands sewn into fists and what looked like bones jutting out of them, but it turns out they were his fingernails, and they had grown right through his hands and left him looking like a monster. Prisoner number 3 told him how a small glass pellet of acid was forced into his appendage, and then broke when it got hard after they brought a naked woman into the room. He was left with his manhood turned inside out from the acid. Prisoner number 4 was starved and couldn't walk as he had knife scars from hot blades all over his body and was left in a puddle of his own shit to die. Prisoner 5 told how the guards would force him to have sex with a woman who had stuck razor blades in glass inside her vagina. This is when Jake started to tear up a small bit. Just hearing what these men did to our American soldiers made me want to cry too. Even now, as I write this, I feel sadness in my heart for those men. They found out through enemy papers that they were scheduled to move the prisoners to another camp the next day. It just goes to show you how we don't know what our soldiers truly went through in the Vietnam War. We can read the history books and look at the footage to get a small idea. But the truth for everybody to know is Vietnam was absolute hell. No one who wasn't there at the time will ever realize the true nature out there. My respects go out to all the veterans who hear this. I pray each day for all of you, and I thank you. It's because of people like you we don't end up like those prisoners. May God bless you. Here is a little story that my dad told me. I am an Asian American who loves to listen to stories here on YouTube. I would listen to all sorts of stories from all different sorts of bloggers. Here is a story which my dad told me of when he was younger. My father was a Vietnam War hero. He fought for the Americans during the Vietnam War. His job was to go and find any crashed American pilot who were shot down and get them back to base. Most of the time, they were okay, maybe just a few bumps or bruises because they bailed out in time. However, the few unlucky times that the pilots didn't make it out, he and his squad would have to take back the mangled pieces back to base in trash bags if they had to. On one of those missions, they received a radio call telling them that an American was shot down near their vicinity and they were the only ones who could respond to it. My dad and his squad went out to find the pilot. He had crash-landed over the other hill. It was still a half a day's walk through the thick jungle. When they got in there, it was already dark, and they found the body. Unfortunately, the pilot did not make it. He seemed to have died on impact, but since he had hit a tree and not the ground, most of the body was intact. There were 4 men in my dad's squad. He ordered one of them to carry the body. Meanwhile, the other 2 covered them and headed back to the base. They made it about halfway back to the base, until they needed to rest and take turns carrying the body. He complained that the big American teeth were biting him. They stopped near a creek and rested. While rested, my dad looked at the body and thought to himself that the body looked like it might still be alive. He went over to check the pulse, but there was no pulse. He checked again. There is still no pulse, but as he looked closer, he can see that the lungs were moving in and out, almost as if the pilot was still breathing. Now, there is a local saying, if you died in the jungle, then you become part of the jungle. This meant that when this pilot died, either an evil spirit or his soul came back to his body. He will become a reanimated corpse, or a zombie if you like. This isn't something to joke about, mind you. Most people from my dad's village don't joke about zombies. But there are plenty of zombie stories and Asian demon stories that I can tell you about. But today is the story I will tell you. My dad isn't afraid. They were armed with M16s and grenades. However, since they were ordered to return the body, they can't destroy it either. My dad didn't want to frighten his men, so he just simply asked another man to carry the body and another man to take point. This second man who had to carry this body started to complain about the big American teeth that were gnawing his neck, and how he didn't like it very much and wanted to switch. My dad agrees, as he didn't want to frighten the men any further, and they continued their walk through the jungle in the pitch black. Finally, they made it back to the base. It was dark, but they managed to leave the body in the morgue. My dad told his men to safely wrap the body so that nothing would happen to it. The next day, the body was shipped back out to the States. Nevertheless, my dad told me that later that day, 2 of the men who had gone with them were later killed in action when they were ambushed in a surprise attack by the Viet Cong. Those 2 men were the men who carried the body. It was as if the body had marked them for death almost. My father survived that war, and he's still alive today at the healthy age of 62 as I write this story right now. He has seen some more weird and unexplained stuff throughout the war. However, those are stories for another day. Hey, thanks for watching today's episode. So those were quite the stories, weren't they? It's been a while since I've really covered sorts of military or war stories for that matter. But for those of you who have been subscribed since I started doing these videos, it was back around 2017. One of the series I had on the channel was covering military stories and war stories. But for those of you again who were around at the time, you kind of remember that YouTube was giving me a hard time. They were age restricting, they were suppressing and demonetizing these military stories, these war stories videos. So I had to stop because it was affecting the channel. I've been bringing these back. Last week, as I upload this video, I uploaded a military stories episode, but of course, as you've seen and as I've seen, YouTube's suppressing that one, and I'm almost certain, I'm like 99.9% certain they're gonna suppress this episode too. I don't know, it's weird. People want to hear military stories and war stories, but then it's like YouTube says, sorry, we're not gonna push it out. So if you are listening, please just do me a quick favor. Click the like button down below if you enjoyed it and leave a comment as well. I'm really trying to fight the algorithm here. I know people love these videos, but it's just nobody gets notified anymore because YouTube says, sorry, we're going to determine what they can and can't listen to, and so we're not going to push this out. But as I mentioned, I do have some other similar themed episodes on the channel if you wanted to go ahead and check it out. If you're a veteran or you're into these sorts of stories, then go check out my channel and see what you might like. I got some other stories content that you might like too. That's not just war stories. I got Home Alone stories, people dealing with burglars, stalkers, murderers, serial killers, all that sort of stuff. So if it's something that you're interested in, check it out. But anyway, that is gonna go ahead and do it for today. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe. Have yourself an amazing day, and I'll catch you all next time. Take care.